Hello and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, and once again, welcome back to RP1. We are playing Realism Overhaul in the real solar system, the realistic progression, and the mod has gone through quite a big overhaul since the last time we played it, and we didn't get very far in the last time we played it, so I'm excited to kind of give it another shot. I've played around with this in my own time, just kind of gotten the hang of everything that's new, so I'm excited to bring it back to the series and continue this on in the place of KSP POV. So first off, we're going to create the Atomic Space Agency, and we're going to pick this nice little electron as our flag and symbol. And we're not going to change any of the options, but you can kind of go through here. If you're going to play this yourself, I do recommend going through all these options in the beginning and seeing what you think will work best for your playthrough. I'm not going to be doing this as a tutorial. I'm still very, very much new to RP1, and so I'm not going to consider myself to be an authority on any of this. I'm not going to be taking the most efficient paths for anything, but we're going to have fun, and I hope you have fun with me as we go along our journey. So first things first, this is a brand new screen that you see in RP1, and it kind of guides you through the first steps that you want to do. As always, we're starting off January 1st, 1951, and we have Kerbal Construction Time as our main mod here. So first off, the first option here allows you to change your site from the Cape Canaveral site to something else. But we're going to skip that because we want Cape Canaveral site, so we're going to go ahead and look at these other options. And it's quite a big step, but we're going to jump to the last step here, and we're going to go ahead and assign our staff. I don't know why it puts this as the last step, basically to get yourself ready for the rocket, but I find that doing this first and foremost is good. And then once we assigned all our staff, I'm going to hire a couple more just to get a little bit of extra get up and go on our rockets. Now next we check out the administration building, but first we're going to go check out the missions. Now as you see here, the missions are going to look quite different than before. They are now organized based off of rocket programs, certain X-planes, early satellites, suborbital rockets, so on, and then all the way down into much more advanced missions. So what that means is we're going to go here into the administration building, and we're going to unlock a program. So now in the new RP1, instead of making money through contracts, you make money over a span of time by doing programs such as this. And each program has a series of contracts that need to be done, as well as some optional ones as well. There is a deadline for this, and every year that the contract or that the program is active pays out a certain amount of money. Now you can choose to do this at a normal pace, and it gives you a few more years, but each year you get less money, or you can do it at a fast pace and you have to do it sooner, but you get more funds per year. But you also can do at a breakneck speed, so if you really know that you can power through those, you can do that. However, these contracts will decay over time, and you will get less and less funding after the contract deadline is over. Now, the next thing I kind of want to talk about is that these are going to require this new resource, which is called confidence. And you start off with 500 of it. And you build confidence by completing contracts, and the confidence allows you to access the fast pace and the breakneck pace for accepting contracts. So now I'm going to take this first one, which is early rocket development. It's the best one to start off with because it's very much the basic rocketry. You break the Kármán line and so on and so forth. Now, but for this second one, this one's going to take a little bit extra effort, so I'm going to take this at a normal pace because I'm not going to be focusing on it right off the get-go. Now, if you see on the left-hand side, all the contracts are now grayed out because we can only take 2 programs at a time. Programs are grayed out. And up here you have leaders, and they're all grayed out at the moment, so we're not going to deal with them just yet. Alright, so now that we've got our programs, we are going to go into the mission control room and pick up a contract. So as we see here, the early rocket development We have an acceptance date. We have contract parameters, basically the same as everything else. And our first launch is very simple, just launch a rocket up in the air. And then the second one is the Kármán line. We have to break 100 kilometers. Now we're using real solar systems, so that means that the line of space actually starts at 140 kilometers. Something, and everything is tuned to be more realistic towards life and history. But anyways, we're going to close that little panel real fast, and before we go to the VAB, we're going to spend this 2 science that we start off the game with. Now there's a couple different options, and the research tree is very much different than the stock KSP, so if you're not familiar with that, I'll just give you a second to kind of take a look at this. You unlock engines and certain parts that are dependent on the decade that those things came out. But we're going to get ahead of ourselves for that. This is the same tech tree as the original RP1, so if you're familiar with that, then this should look very familiar to you. So there's a couple different things we can spend our points on, and most people go for material science because you can make more lightweight tanks, but I'm going to go here and focus on our engines. So we're going to unlock this early rocketry testing, or post-war rocketry testing, and early solid rocket boosters. So that's going to take both points of science, and as we see here in the Kerbal construction little widget, it's going to take that amount of time. If you're not familiar with Kerbal construction time, it adds, time to your construction. You can't just make a rocket and pop it out on the launch pad. You have to build the thing, hence the realism. So anyways, we're going to open this here first, but we want to actually back out of here and go into our settings, and we want to make sure that our advanced tweakables and our extended burn time are activated. Now, I've been playing this for a little bit, so they're already activated on my screen, but if this is your first time playing RP1, these two are going to be deselected, and you definitely want to select them. Advanced Tweakables gives you many different options in the VAB and outside, and the extended burn time just makes it so you don't have to do the math in your head to execute your maneuver. Anyways, here we are in the VAB, and we're going to start off with avionics core and a steel fuselage and the Aerobee engine. Now over here you see all the information about the engine that you could possibly need. Weights, ISPs, thrust to weight ratios, etc. And that's going to be very important in RP1. So anyways, next we're going to put this little interstage decoupler and then follow it up with a Tiny Tim SRB booster. Now this is just the general shape of the very first rocket. Obviously you can make things differently if you want to, obviously, but this is just kind of how the tutorial in the wiki kind of gives it to you, and I've been following that and it's been working, and I just kind of got the basics of it for myself, so that way later on I can kind of branch out once I understand the concepts. So we're going to follow the wiki tutorial for a little bit, and then eventually once we start getting into things like orbital rocketry, where the tutorial doesn't cover, that's where we're going to be really testing our mettle. So here we are, we're turning our avionics into a cone, and we're going to just give this a little bit of coloring real fast. And I've really liked the Mercury coloring, the red and white stripes. I enjoyed that, so I'm going to go ahead and go with that. And then we're going to go ahead and change our avionics to be a science core. Now a science core has no control. It's an unguided rocket. If we wanted guided things, we're going to need the near Earth or a different type of core that we haven't unlocked yet. Anyway, so with the science core, we can load it up with some science experiments. So if you look here, you'll notice that the experiments are quite different. They actually take time to run. They only run in specific biomes, and we have to make sure that we activate them beforehand, so that way we don't forget to activate them later. Anyways, we're also going to turn down the communications slider. We only need 20 dBms. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at our engine. So this requires a high pressure fuel tank and has a burn time of 47 seconds. So we're going to need to extend out our fuel tank until our delta V stats over here on the left match that. Now we can fill the tank with all sorts of different fuels, a whole bunch of them, but to just let the program do it itself, we're going to hit fill with the AeroB fuel, and it's going to put the correct mixture in there. So now as we make adjustments here, you can see on the delta V stats that the burn time is going up. So we're going to want to get that to our engine said that it has 47 seconds of burn time, but we can add 5 extra seconds on there because there's about 5 free seconds as the engine is coming up to speed. So we can actually throw more fuel in there. You can stack it, and the engine will run sometimes, but you will also end up putting more weight onto your rocket by carrying more fuel, which means it has to work harder to get out, and so it's a nice balance you got to find and strike with your fuel. Anyways, moving on, we are moving quickly. We are going to put some wings on here because, as you can see, our center of lift is above our center of mass, and that's going to lead for some floppy rockets. So we have these procedurally generated wings, and these are going to be what we use for the majority of our stuff moving forward. As you see here, we can adjust all the different ways by the slider. There's also this box on the left that I could just use that to input, but I like to kind of do it by hand here and only use that box for fine-tuning if I need to. So the wings don't have to be much, a little low profile. In fact, the closer you can get the center of lift to the center of mass, the better, because that center of mass is only going to go up. So it'll be stable through that. And wings can cost a lot. The size and density of them, the strength of them, anyways, that will all adjust the cost of your wings. So if you can just minimize the amount of wing you need, it will do you better in the long run. Now I'm just giving it a little bit of paint. I've been kind of experimenting around with this. I don't have very much experience with painting rockets, so I want to do something when I can. As you see here, we emptied the fuel and you got to see the center of mass go upwards, so we know that those wings are fine. But once again, the center of lift is too high once we add the tiny Tim, so we just copy those wings and bring them down to the bottom, and once again our rocket is stable. So let's go ahead and name this the RP-1. And so now we're going to take a look at our staging, and we're seeing that this is all wrong. So first things first, we want the tiny Tim to fire. That is our SRB. Now the AeroB has a spool up time, so that's going to take a couple seconds before it's fully fired. So we're going to put that on the same stage as the tiny Tim. And we're also going to release our launch clamp, because the tiny Tim will go off immediately so it can go. Now we're going to turn off the force percentage on this decoupler because we don't want it interfering with our engines in any way by pushing. And then we're going to go ahead and save. Now I just want to bring up real fast a small little thing, the notepad of the Kerbal commandments that I've created. And as you can read them here, these are just little guidelines I'm going to try to keep in mind as I go along. That's going to help us stay in the right direction. So anyways, we're going to open up the engine GUI and kind of see that there are different engines that we can upgrade this to, and so that's why I'm really excited to use the AeroB, because this is going to push us far. Alright, so now that we have our rocket, we are going to simulate, because one of the commandments was simulate until satisfied, and that is exactly what we're going to do. So now I'm going to input the time incorrectly and then skip right past the simulation. We're going to be skipping past the simulations in this series, and we're going to show you the real launches, the ones that have consequences. So that was a good simulation, and I really enjoyed how that performed. So we are going to go ahead and create a launch complex. So now what this is this is a specified complex to hold certain parameters of rockets, so certain heights, weights, lengths, certain tonnages, and certain fuels and resources that needs to be pumped into this. And each launch complex needs to be able to hold the rocket that you're trying to put on there. So we're going to start off simply with a maximum of 1 ton rocket that's basically going to fit this, but I added a little extra height onto it to kind of future-proof it. So before we can put the rocket into the queue, we're going to have to build this launch complex. So we're going to time warp forward. And as you see here, researchers have been working hard on that science. That's going to be good. So the launch complex is complete, and so now we can come in here and put our rocket in the queue. But first, before we do that, we're going to want to tool it. Now, basically what tooling is it's a way of automating the process of building. So as the rocket is currently, it is basically built by hand, and that is hard work, and it's time consuming, and it's cost consuming. So currently our rocket will cost $534, but once we spend a little funds to create the tools to automate it, we can purchase that, and now it's a $93 rocket. So now we can start pumping these things out like candy. So once we go to launch, we get this little pop-up saying that we have to unlock all these different parts, and that's okay because all those parts are basically free to unlock in this first stage anyways. I put a couple copies of the Arabi in here, and that's for the redundancy, so that way if something goes wrong with one of them, we already have one in the queue stored up and potentially already having been built. And in RP1, failures are a commonplace. You have to build up data on your engines, and the more data you have, the more reliable they become, but no engine is 100% reliable, and it is very different than stock KSP in that aspect. You can't just spacebar and fire. So here we are, we're looking at our complex, and if we hire more staff, it will build faster. But currently we're just going to leave our staff as it is. It's going to be a little bit before we do some aggressive spending into our program, but once you start pumping in money and getting more engineers and more researchers, things start moving faster. So it's never, I wouldn't say it's never a bad idea, but it's usually a good idea to be a little bit bullish with your funds. Alright, so our rocket is laid out on the launch pad and we are ready to go. We are going to be flying some of these through ascent guidance, the MechJeb autopilot. Eventually we're going to have to not rely on that. We're going to have to rely on our own judgments in flying. But first off, we're going to get all of these little windows up. We're going to get our contract window. We're going to get the avionics that'll show us our science, to show us when our science is going. And then, very importantly, in our settings, since we're using the MechJeb autopilot, we need to check this setting so that way it doesn't kill our throttle in between stages. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but that is a setting that we need to turn on. So anyways, here we are. We have launch. And the rocket is unguided, so we get this little message saying it's uncontrolled. And we have a clean separation from the Tiny Tin booster. And we had no problems of ullage, so our Arabi will be firing nominally. And so we're going to also keep the Arabi engine window up. So we've already successfully completed the first contract, which is to launch the thing. And we are going to be on our way towards the second contract, which is to break the Kármán line at 100 kilometers. So now I'm going to just fast forward the footage a little bit. It does take time. RP1 is definitely more time intensive than stock KSP, but there's ways around it. You can time warp or physics warp in the game, but you run the risk of failures and just complete disaster. So during these during these real runs, basically non-simulated runs, we will not be physics warping at all, unless the engines aren't running or anything. Even then, sometimes we won't be physics warping because you just run the risk of disaster, and it's not worth it. When you have to wait months for a rocket, when you have to spend valuable funds, when you have to pay the salaries of engineers day in and day out for those months, it's you want these launches to go right. Speaking of which, I will allow myself a rule in this, is we will allow ourselves one revert to launch per launch or whatever, per rocket, and that's only if it's not through a failure. So if our aerobee engine fails to light, or our avionics don't work, then we're going to just have to eat that and fix the rocket and work on it. But if we accidentally time warp and the Kraken takes it apart, then we're not going to revert it. Real fast, I just brought up the range safety to show you that we had completed both the Carbon line and the first launch contracts. So technically, we could be done. We could just blow up this rocket and be done with it. However, we are still gaining science, and we will be gaining science until we hit 40 kilometers on the way back down. We also completed a bunch of contracts, a bunch of world's firsts, for speeds and altitude records. So this is a very successful first rocket, and we didn't have any failures in the engine. We didn't have any problems with ullage. Everything went according to plan, or even better. So now that we passed 40 kilometers, we can range safety it because it's no longer collecting any science, and we don't need to follow it all the way down. So now we're going to head back to the Space Center, and we are going to revel in our success, our very first rocket ever, and it reaches space. Good enough to make headlines. It's excellent. So let's clean up the trash on the launch pad, and the launch pad needs to be reconditioned before it can be used again. And we have 2 more of those, which are set to roll out. But let's go ahead and check out our missions. So now that we've completed that, we can grab the next set of contracts, and I have both programs that I can run from. So this contract here is an interesting one, but it requires a science experiment that we haven't unlocked yet. So I'm not going to be able to do that program just yet. So instead, we're going to work on this one. But we're not going to take it just yet, because I want to show you a handy little trick in RP1, and that is to save. We are going to pop down a save, and we're going to name it, and we're going to mark the fact that this is before we took the contract, because you can damage yourself and your agency by taking a contract that you're not yet ready for, because you can't really do anything except for fail it, and you can't take any other contracts until you complete it or fail it, basically. And so it's very important to make sure that you know that you can achieve a goal, or at least you have the ability to achieve a goal beforehand. Alright, so now we are just going to warp past the conditioning of the launch pad, and we see that our science is going to be the next thing to be unlocked. So we are going to go ahead and unlock that. And that is post-war rocketry testing, and that is going to unlock a better engine for us. For the aerobee, we're going to be able to upgrade that. So we are going to get rid of this secondary rocket, and then we're going to take a quick look at our science tab. It's always a good idea to kind of come back here and just refresh yourself on what you just unlocked, so you know exactly what to look for in there. So anyways, we have 4.1 extra science, and so we are going to figure out now what we want to put it in. So we're going to spend 2 here to get the materials upgrade, and then this will unlock the biological experiment capsule, and that is what we need to do that other mission, the mission that is on the other program. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and edit here, but I'm just going to call ahead real fast, and editing is not the right move, but we will learn that soon enough. So now I'm going to be looking at our current engine and looking at all of its factors, and then we're going to be comparing that to the upgraded version that we just unlocked. So now the first thing to notice is that it actually has a shorter burn time than the previous Aerobee version. And the upgraded version is the XASR, and that is what we're going to be using here. But you would think, hey, it burns for less time, how can that be better? Well, the other factors to it is the fact that it is lighter than the previous engine, and it burns at a different rate than it does, so it allows us to have a different fuel mixture in there as well, and so all of that attributes to it being more efficient. So even though it burns for a shorter amount of time, the quality of burn that it does is much better. So because the size of our rocket was not suited to the correct fuel mixture that we added into it to compensate for the new engine, so we had to extend it a little bit, making it even bigger. And then part of the contract that we're going to be doing now is to launch the rocket and to recover at least a portion of it. All we really need to recover is the avionics, so we are going to put a parachute under that, and we are going to rate the parachute for that particular weight of just the avionics. We're going to change its pre-deployment down to about 1,000. And we're going to just make sure that that's seated correctly. And then now we are going to put a decoupler on. We're just going to use this procedural one because it's nice and easy. Turn it into a cylinder and change its diameter to match. We're also going to turn off the force percent because at the time we decided that we don't want it kicking the avionics, but later we'll change that. So there we go. We now have the Aerobee 2, which I prefer the Aerobee 1B. I end up renaming it back to the 1B because it is still basically the same Aerobee as before, and the Aerobee 2 will come later. But nonetheless, now it's time to save the rocket and to simulate, because once again we must simulate over and over again until we are absolutely satisfied with our stuff. So now just checking our center of lift and center of mass, and so now we are going to input the date correctly, which is almost as a string, one solid string of numbers, no letters in there, just 00. And then that way, that will put us on the right time for the simulation. So anyways, I am proud to say that that Aerobee performed successfully, and we are looking forward to a launch. However, we are getting this warning saying that our launch complex is not suitable for it. And even though I added the extra height, which would have compensated for the extra height that we made the rocket, it did not account for the different fuel mixture that this Aerobee 1B is going to require, because the new engine requires a different set of propellants than just the V1 did. So what we're going to do is we're going to scrap that rocket, and we're going to instead build a new one, which is and by that I mean just load the rocket that we had saved. And so now we are going to once again give it a little bit of extra height, and we are going to renovate it, and by renovating it, it will bring in the correct mixture of fuel. So as you see here, we are checking against our rocket to see that it is indeed the correct mixture. There we go. Yep. So now we're going to go ahead and renovate it. Yep, see, we're just confirming it is the correct measure. So we're going to renovate it, and then we have to back out of here and let that launch pad build before we can send out that rocket for production. I feel like you should be allowed to send out or start building a rocket even before the launch complex is made, as long as you're not rolling it out before it's made, but I don't know. They probably have a good reason for that. Alright, so now that the launch complex is made, we are just going to go ahead and launch one and unlock the parts. And we had forgotten to tool it. it's always best to tool it before putting it out. So we're now tooling the new parts of the rocket. And we also put out the rocket before grabbing the contract, which I don't know if it's a bad thing or not. It always says launch a new vessel, and so I don't know if that means that the rocket can't be built before the contract is made or not. But I always, if I forget to if I forget to grab the contract beforehand, I like to just go back and rebuild. So I'm kind of going back and forth and trying to see which rocket was the one that was supposed to be made. Because like I said, I named both the 1B, or I built it and named it as both the 1B and the 2. Alright, so now it is launch day and it is time. Let's go ahead and fire that. And then when we stage, we get a failure in the engine. The engine is not going to work at all. And this launch is, we're going to call it a wash. And like I said, we are not going to revert the flight unless, if it's, we're not going to revert the flight if it's a failure of a part. So all we can do is range safety and destroy that. And then that is why putting in 2 rockets at the same time to build one after the other is a good idea, because this one has already been started, so the time was much shorter. So once again, launch day. So we fire straight up, and then there's a clean separation and our engine does not fail. So it's a glorious day when your engine does not fail. We're going to go ahead and speed up the time here and just show you the full ascent, and show you that it is indeed the same launch. There's no camera trickery here, that this indeed is working. And we're going to catch our breath here. We've been talking quite a bit, and there's a lot to go over, and we'll probably not be talking this rapidly and this much in the coming episodes, because there was just a lot to cover in this first episode, a lot of new things dealing with RP1, and just certain things that I wanted to cover, just in case if you're not familiar with RP1. I don't want to be throwing concepts out there that are just way too different than what you might be familiar with. I want everyone to kind of be on the same pace, and I'd rather someone roll their eyes and say, "Oh yeah, I know that. You don't need to explain that," than someone not understand what I'm saying and for me to be flippant about it. So anyways, speaking of being flippant, our rocket is taking a nice little tumble as it goes down. But this rocket didn't work. It didn't have enough height, and so we just waited until it stopped producing science and we just destroyed it. So now we're coming back here into our science tab, and we're going to see if we can spend any kind of points from the little bit of science that we just got from there. So we take another look at our solid rocket boosters, and we take another look at our other engines. But the engines are going to be a little much. The solid rocket boosters are within our grasp, so we're going to go ahead and set our research for that. And as you see, we actually unlocked another node, which is the solid, the very first solid rocket booster. So we're going to go ahead and edit this. We're going to edit this rocket. The Tiny Tim is nice, but this unlocked SRB is going to be much nicer. So we go ahead and grab the Aerojet, and we put it on right there. And we kind of just take a look at its stats. Now this is going to burn for a little bit longer than the Tiny Tim will. And it has a much higher thrust to weight ratio and stuff, so it's definitely an upgrade. But you can see right here, if you want to pause, you can compare the two. So yeah, this is going to be the SRB that will allow us to complete this contract. And it's interesting, if you find yourself struggling with the contract, struggling with reaching a desired goal, sometimes changing around the engines can make a huge difference. Alright, so once again, it's going to need a launch clamp, so we put that back on, and we turn on our center of mass and lift, and we replace the tail fins on there, and just like the Tiny Tim, it balances the rocket again. So now we just make sure that our stages are correct, and then we're going to go ahead and turn the force percentage back up on this, because since there's no engine there, we don't run the risk of any kind of bump back. And since we didn't replace the liquid fuel, we have no need to change the launch complex, and because an SRB is built as is, so it doesn't need to be fueled. So that's nice. So we're going to go ahead and bring up both the Aerobee engine and the Aerojet engine's GUI to keep an eye on all the stats. Now what I'm looking at right now is the DU, which is the amount of information we have about the engine, and the more information we build up on it, the more reliable it becomes. So that's why even bad launches are worthwhile. You learn from everything, and that's why it's important to just keep pushing out rockets when you can. So here we are. I skipped ahead because it was basically the same launch, but now we pushed a little bit higher, and we will complete our goal of our height goal anyways. The real question is whether or not we can bring this back home safely. So we're gonna time warp ahead, let it flip, flip, flip. We get some science done. And now we have broken the Kármán line, the real Kármán line. We are officially in space. We are now on a suborbital trajectory, and we have all new science to collect. And then once again, we are in Earth's atmosphere. So this rocket was very successful, at least in its delivery into space. And so this rocket is going to be kind of our stepping stone going forward, and we're going to be building off of this. If you're familiar with my previous two videos of RP1, you'll know that the next step that we're going to build is a bumper rocket, and that is a much larger rocket below something like this Aerobee to send our rockets even farther. But that's in the next episode. So now we wait on bated breath for 1,500 meters, and our parachutes deploy. But we pass 700 meters and they don't deploy fully, so I'm starting to get a little bit worried, but the speed goes down considerably. They deployed at about 500 meters, so that was fine. And we got ourselves down to a very calm, slow speed, so I have no fear that this will return and touch down safely. And with that, we completed our contract as well as this episode. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward to more of this updated RP1. I've definitely been having a lot of fun with this, and I'm looking forward to it as well. So if you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.